Let's begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters of self-realization, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashai, Swami Sri Yukteswar, and our beloved Guru Paramhansa Yogananda, we bow to all of you again and again and again. Divine Masters, with thy presence within us, around us, beside us, where can there be fear? Where can there be anxiety? Thy healing presence is our reality. May we realize that. May we feel thy presence, thy living guidance in everything we do. May we rest in that blessing. Om Shanti Shanti. Amen. Uh, so again, I want to talk a little bit about fear, anxiety, and because it's an important topic and it's something that all of us in some way or another probably are going to face that. Maybe nobody is ever worried about anything, but I don't think so. And but of course, these things come in various level, anxiety, and in other words, people can just being apprehensive, and of course, based on past experiences, things that have happened, or even things that we imagine not really true, and we're anxious about it, we worry about it, and I think that's probably for most people that's the way we experience anxiety in that way. Oh my gosh, am I going to get to work on time? Or is somebody going to is Jaya going to show up for the online class? Maybe, oh my God, whatever it might be. That sort of thing is normal. I mean, and it's a part of life. But then, of course, what if we worry all the time? And, it can get to the point where we live in a state of constant anxiety, or it's out of proportion, you could say. And then something is amiss there that we've got to be able to address that. And but uh, and there are strategies, of course, for what we do if we're anxious, and I'd like to discuss a little bit about that. But I want to specifically focus on something that is also part of anxiety. And because the solutions to this particular expression of anxiety apply to all of anxiety. And I've been having to deal with these sorts of things because I have family members, of course, who suffer from Alzheimer's disease. And anxiety is one of the symptoms. I mean, one of the results, not the symptoms so much, but it's one of the consequences of that because one begins to lose control over one's faculties. And that induces a sense of anxiety in those who suffer from dementia and these sorts of things. And but I'm going to go there. But the more specific expression of that, which is you might say anxiety is on many levels. One of the more extreme elements of anxiety is what's known as panic attacks. And interestingly, I have had those experiences in the past, which I'd like to share with you and what I did about them. And so I can speak from personal experience about this. It's not pleasant. And and I've never talked about it, particularly in an online class like this. And there's a certain stigma, if a person is suffering from anxiety severe, and you could say panic attacks are a very severe form of anxiety. It's sort of a stigma of, oh, there's some sort of something wrong with you, or there's some weakness. And then I ran across this statistic because I don't remember what induced me to come upon this statistic, but I saw an article about it. And so I said, oh, I've experienced that. And I started to read the article, and it said that 1 out of 3 people at some point in their life is going to suffer from panic attacks in their life. Now, 1 out of 3. Now, it's 2 out of 3. You'll never know what we're talking about. But and we got enough people here on this online session today, there's probably 1 or 2 or 3 or more have experienced this. And of course, they're mild and severe and so on. They go on that. And so basically, the solutions and things we can do for these things. And I certainly do not claim to be an expert, but I'm just the person who's experienced these things and would like to share what I've discovered. And I think it's a fruitful discussion in a larger forum than we have today. I, but so panic attacks is, let me define it. I looked it up in the dictionary or on Google, and so I could, rather than I could put the definition, see if this fits. The definition is a panic attack is a brief episode of intense anxiety, which causes the physical sensations of fear. These can include a racing heartbeat, shortness of breath, dizziness, trembling, and muscle tension. Panic attacks occur frequently and unexpectedly and are often not related to any external threat. Now, I might add to that, one of the things that's very frightening about panic attacks, at least in my experience, was you have an episode where you lose your grip on reality. Your mind is out of control, and it's very frightening, is you might say, is that. And this happened to me when I was in my 30s at that time, midlife, you might say. And it was episodes that happened once very dramatically in my experience, and then continued for a few years. And to say that they've gone away, yes, they have, but I pay attention to it because I can see the precursors, and there are certain, and you could say that I've worked on it to say, hey, I didn't. That was a terrible experience. I don't want it again, and what can I do about it? And it motivated me, you might say. You could sort of say, fright and fear has one positive, if anything, it has one positive benefit. It motivates us to do something. And basically, I was in my 30s. I was living in Ananda village, and Sadhana Devi and I were married. And I was working we had a company that constructed houses, a construction company. And there was one day in the hot summer where we had to do a job pouring concrete, very physically intensive job. And we had, once you started that pour, you had to finish. You couldn't stop in the middle. So we went all day, very hot weather. I was dehydrated. At the end of the day, I was extremely tired, and I was exhausted, actually, physically exhausted. And on my way home with a couple of other people that were driving our truck we had, I had to stop at a hardware store to buy some material for the project that was in. So I went into the store and I was gathering all these things in a basket, and all of a sudden, completely out of the blue, I looked up and everything began to swim. It was probably the physical part. It was just swimming. And it was just like, and my reality switched, and I became paralyzed in a way. I couldn't make sense out of what was going on around me. I was dizzy, I had a little bit of nausea. I was shortness of breath. I wasn't breathing very well. And I could not take that basket of material that I had up to the counter to check out because I didn't know what I would say. I had totally lost control of my mind. In other words, basically, I was out of my mind, you could say. And it was frightening. I'd never ever experienced something like that before in my life. And I just was petrified, and I just didn't know what to do. And I just, it's like you're sort of in a crisis mode. And I said, just and I put the basket down. I didn't even take them back to the shelves. I just put the basket down. It says, walk out that door, get back in the truck, get out of here. And so I did. I just went into robot mode, got in the truck, and people say, hey, where'd you have to? I says, let's go home. And we went home. Now I had to do a class that night also. And I got home and I couldn't talk to anybody. I was just such in an altered state. And I just did it completely I had no idea where that came from. And it lasted. It lasted that evening, that night, and that slowly moderated. But then it began to come back because I remembered it. And as soon as I started thinking about it, I'd start to go back into that state again. And I was saying, my God, I think I've lost my mind. And is it going to come back? And so you could imagine the situation. And this began to happen episodically from after that. And I said, and so obviously you're motivated to do something about it. And And eventually, after a certain, and I'm going to say eventually, after these episodic things started happening to me for about at least 2 years. It wasn't easy. I said, what's happening here? And of course, I didn't talk to anybody about any of this because, of course, there's a stigma involved in it. And so I carried on. But the problem was, and this has lasted ever since, you might say, because there was seemingly no cause for it that I could make out, except I was exhausted. Uh, that could happen at any time. And you say, oh my God, any time that might come back. And that's a little bit of a frightening thought. What if I'm up on the stage giving a lecture and all of a sudden, or you totally lose your mind and you just can't function. So that thought is very frightening and it causes a little bit of anxiety. And so, of course, my nature is, well, if you got a problem, you got to figure out a solution to this. And so I delved into it and began to look and see what I could do so that if it should ever come again, I'd know what to do. And as time went by, these things would start to come. I said, nope. And I would calm it down and I would overcome it. And as the years went by, I've got pretty good at that. And I haven't had this, I mean, really, I can see it. If I put my mind to it, I can see it somewhere. And sometimes in the middle of the night, I'll wake up and I'm very much in the subconscious state I've been dreaming in. And these thoughts will start coming and I'll wake up and I said, nope, don't go there. Don't go there. And that's because you see, my mind says I can control anything. I can take care of this, but I can't. And that's why I said, don't go there. And I start doing something that I learned to do. Now, I don't want to take up too much time here, but because all of us, whether we suffer from panic attacks or just general anxiety, which is common in society today, there are things that we could do. And I think one of the things that is most important, and dealing with people who have Alzheimer's, I've come to this also because they become very anxious. And what can we do if we know somebody else? We don't suffer from this, but we know somebody else. One is we get too much in the mind, and the mind starts to get out of control, and we can't control it. And that's what the frightening part is. Well, diversion. There's a thing called the 3-3-3 rule, or some people call it the 5-4-3-1-2-1 rule. And it's in the moment something triggers you or something triggers another person become anxious. There's things we can do. And it's called 3-3-3 is look around and consciously identify three objects. There's the phone, there's the computer, there's the carpet. If consciously identify three physical objects, then consciously identify three sounds. Okay, it's quiet, but I can hear ringing in my ears, and so on. And then consciously move with attention three body parts. I'm going to move my arm, I'm going to move my foot, my legs, and so on. There are variations, as I say, on this technique. But what that is doing is it's diverting your attention. It's a strategy to help focus and ground you when anxiety comes. So if you and apply this to worry, if you're a worrier, is you divert the mind away from what you're doing. And so this is basically it. And you could strategize about this to find something that fits with you. But take the other thing very calm, take deep breaths, because anxiety and fear, you stop breathing. And and we'd always say this, yeah, you run into problems, you get angry, whatever emotion comes, breathe deeply. And it's really important for when you have a panic attack or anxiety in general. And then do it consciously. This is why the measured breathing is just rather than breathing, do it measured because it puts your attention on what you're doing. Now, some people say that there are certain scents, like I'm told, I've never tried this, but told that the scent of lavender is calming. And if you have a little essence bottle of lavender, but I think the more important point is the specific scent, it could be some other scent maybe, may have that effect. but it's the activation of that sense that is diverting away from whatever it is you're anxious about, and it just diverts the mind to some other track. You get off this track of anxiety, because if you follow it and go by its rules, it's going to overwhelm you. It's, at least it did me, overwhelm me. And change your environment, peaceful environment. Focus on an object, focusing and using any of your senses to focus elsewhere. Now, what works for me, because I'm a devotee of this path, and particularly this worked for me when I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I could feel my mind wanting to go into chaos, start spinning into chaos. I started to repeat a mantra. I said, Om Guru, Om Guru. And I have never done with such intensity in that period of my life, that mantra, Om Guru. And I would repeat that mantra very consciously with very much intention until I fell asleep. And I'd be saying Om Guru, and then the next thing I know, it was morning time or whatever. And if I let my mind go off that mantra, this chaos of the mind that comes about when one is suffering is magnetically pulls you into that vortex of chaos, and you lose it, and that's frightening. And so you have to divert it. And then the mantra, I says, I'm not going there. I'm going to do this. Walk, go out and walk, exercise, chop wood, whatever it might be that you do. It has to be physically engaging. And then do your breathing, do your mantra, do all muscle relaxation techniques. Now, obviously, as if we're devotees of Paramhansa Yogananda, energization exercise, tense with will, which means attention. Tense with will, relax and feel. Again, you do those 15 minutes and you basically, you've warded off. And the other thing is, and I think this is, because there's two things going on. You see yourself in a state of chaos, right? So your normal mind and everything is chaotic and you're frightened. But there's who is I watching this happen? That's interesting. And now that's part of the you might say the jnana yogi approach. Now you can see it all happen. You can't control it though, and that's I think what. Now in the moment you're not going to think of all these things, but later on it's interesting. Who is this I? Now I've pondered that, but remember, in the moment, this I would tell me I'm in chaos. It will pass. It will, and have faith that it will pass, because medically speaking, it does pass. These things usually last for a certain period of time. It could be momentarily, or it could be for 15, 20 minutes. The intense part of it maybe might be for that long, but then the memory of it and the ramifications may go on for some days even. And I would say, now, if the attacks are frequent and you aren't able to address them on your own, seek help. Find other people. I mean, if you have a family doctor or whatever, talk about it. There is a stigma involved with that. Oh my God, I'm going crazy. Who wants to say that? Or I've got a problem. People don't like to say that. But yet find somebody you can talk to about it. No, you don't have to do that if it's mild, but if it's really getting to the point where it's becoming an issue with you, seek help and you'll find. And in time, I found, my own experience of it, is that these things do pass. And you begin, but even today, because that thought is, because it was so out of the blue. I don't know where it came from. It made me look at my life and say, what is it about me that is opened the door to this? And so I said, I have to make whatever changes are necessary. And there were certain things, because at that time in my life, I also suffered from migraine headaches. And so there was a relationship, but I'm not going to go into that today because we don't have the time. But seek help if you need it, but take these few clues. Primarily engage in the mind elsewhere until you give enough time for that episode to pass, and then start working on it so that you change whatever behavior that you might notice in yourself to bring on those things. Logic doesn't, now if you're comforting somebody who's experiencing these things, you might think, oh, they're there, it's going to pass. That doesn't really help. Somebody, that person in the midst of that attack, help them change their consciousness to something else. And this is the most common technique when you're dealing with somebody with Alzheimer's, dementia, these sorts of things. When they start to experience anxiety, it's chaotic for them. Engage them in something tangibly helpful or other. Take them for a walk. You go out, oh, hey, let's do this, let's do that. And it gets their mind out of that whirlpool of chaos that the dementia person is suffering at that time. So this is helpful. There's much that could be said, but I'm going to leave it at that today. So let's motion.